Hi, my name is Mike Feinstein, and I am from Santa Monica, beautiful Santa Monica, California, on the beach right next to Los Angeles in Southern California. And I've been in politics since 1988, when I went to the Findhorn community in Scotland to a conference called The Individual and the Collective, Politics as if the Whole Earth Mattered. And that introduced me to green politics that was happening in Europe, not so much in the United States at that time. And I came back, went back to California and helped to start the Green Party of California and the Green Party of the United States. And I did that because there wasn't a voice for the planet, for ecology and grassroots democracy and social justice and nonviolence, those values which unite Green Parties around the world. There wasn't a voice for that in US politics. And that happened during the Ronald Reagan presidential era, when the United States was a very materialist country. And for me, the Green Party, starting in the US, kind of filled a spiritual void in our political system. For me, what democracy means is that people who are affected by decisions have a right to have a say in those decisions that affect them. And if that's the principle that you start with, you can look at different forms of government at different levels, but always go back to that idea. So it might be where you have something, development proposed for your local neighborhood, and you have a neighborhood or association. Your city council might have advisory councils from that very specific neighborhood. You require a developer to go to those people in that neighborhood and talk to them first, and not just go ahead and hire expensive attorneys and go to the city council and try and get the project approved. I was on the Santa Monica City Council for 8 years, from 1996 to 2004, and 2 years as mayor. And we were always pushing to have more neighborhood voice. So then, when you're thinking on the municipal level, people are busy. So how do they have that neighborhood voice? So we always looked at funding support staff to help neighbors organize for themselves. There would be community meetings where we might have 10 city staff members who all have PhDs, and they have to go there on a weekend and listen to 25 neighbors, and we would commit to that, and that was very important. So on a very local level, that's something that I push for in practice. It's a little harder to have democracy on higher and higher levels the further you get from your community. And in California, where I live, I just ran for Secretary of State, and that's the chief elections official for California. I ran to try and change our electoral system, which is modeled after the British system. It's a single seat, winner-take-all system, and it's one of the worst in the world because the size of our legislature was set in 1879. We had 865,000 people in California in 1879. We have 40 districts for the state senate. There's 1 million people per state senate district today, more than were in the entire state of California in 1879. So I campaigned first on having more seats in the national legislature, and then number two, to change to a system of proportional representation so that the diversity of our society all has a seat at the table. What we say often in California is, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're on the menu. And too many people are on the menu in our politics, because not only are these districts very large and thus only one party can win, but if you're running in a very large district, the amount of money you need to win that district is very large. That gives more influence to big money. It makes it harder for regular people to have a voice. Now, as a Green Party member, and this may be interesting to your international audiences, one of the things that is really important is for the voters to be able to know where candidates stand. In our system, it's only candidates who have big money who can afford direct mail pieces to send them to all the voters, because you can't go door to door. I went door to door when I ran for city council, and that's one of the reasons I was elected my first time. But for these higher offices, you can't do that. So you have to have all this money. Well, the way that you balance that is by having free television time. Again, a lot of other democracies have free television time. What happened in the United States is that the Clinton administration in 1996 helped to pass the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which was the first time it was updated since 1934. They gave away, at the time, what was valued at $70 billion of the digital public airwaves to existing corporations without any requirement that there is time in the public interest, broadcast time. So we gave it away. So now what we could have required is that every candidate who qualifies for the ballot gets some time on the television, so that all voters have a chance to hear about all candidates who are on the ballot instead of just the people who can buy their way. We call that pay-to-play politics. It was the Democrats who gave that away in the United States. I was part of the group that recruited Ralph Nader to run for president because he was a public interest person, and he ran and criticized that. The Democrats criticized us instead of explaining that they gave away part of our democracy to the corporations. Now, you look today to the election of our new Nazi president, Donald Trump. He got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of free television because he was good for ratings, because he was such a scandal. And the people who ran CBS and some of the other stations bragged that he might be bad for the country, but he was good for ratings. That's a result of the Telecom Act in '96. Because Clinton gave away the public airwaves, we become dependent upon large corporations who are interested only in their bottom line, and then they sell our political messaging to whoever will increase their ratings and get more advertising dollars. So the Democrats, in this way, there's a direct line between their failure to protect the public interest that we got this guy for president now. And that's why you have to go back to what I said at the beginning, that every voter has to have a right to have a voice in the decisions that affect them, and they have to be empowered with that information. The final thing I want to add is that when I ran for Secretary of State in California as well, I talked about these large single-seat winner-take-all districts. Instead, if we had I proposed a 500-seat unicameral, one-house legislature of California with proportional representation, and it was modeled along the German system, which is half the seats are elected with individual single-seat districts, half from a proportional representation election, but that proportionality, it's a compensatory system. I won't bore your listeners with all the details, but the reality is if 40% of the people vote for one party, they get 40% of the seats. So if they won some of the seats in the individual districts, then they get the rest of them proportional. That brings more voices to the table. Again, that's that point about if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And the final thing that I did was very interesting for California is that we are a nation state. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We are a state of regions. It's a very large, we're about 1,000 miles from south to north. We're about 500 miles from east to west at our widest point. And there are very different economic bioregions, et cetera, in the state. And what I suggested is that instead of, as they have in Germany, a single proportional representation election for the entire country, we would have 8 regional proportional representation elections so that different regions could debate better and send a multiplicity of views to the state legislature. And one of the specific issues where that would have helped us just now is that we suffer from a great affordable housing crisis in California. There is incredible homelessness. It is criminal. And yes, it's a failure of capitalism on the broadest sense, but it's also a failure of planning. So, and to plan for the population growth and to plan for transit-oriented housing and development. So in these past couple of years, there have been a lot of people who have tried to pass new legislation to deal with our housing crisis, but because we aren't electing people out of regional public policy debates, because we only have these single-seat districts or direct mandates, as a result, the bills failed in Sacramento that would have compelled transit-oriented development and density along transit lines, which is, of course, the ecological way to go, create more human-scaled cities, walkability, etc. And had we sent people to Sacramento, to our state capital, from a system where those regional voices would have been better expressed, we probably would have gotten housing policies that would have had broader public support. So there's an intimate connection there between basic quality of life and people's ability to have a voice in government.